Joining us today for office hours, I have Robbie from Cribble. And I just first want to thank everyone for tuning in. You guys know that every week on Hot Jobs, I talk about the opportunities at Cribble. And I thought, who better to talk about them than an expert themselves? So, first, Robbie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
So, I want to take a second. I mentioned that I talk a lot about the opportunities at Cribble on our Hot Jobs platform. And one of the things that you've been so gracious with is sharing your experience with some of our candidates and some transitioning service members who are interested in just breaking into the space. So would you give us a little bit of background on yourself and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been at Cribble about 13 months now. I work in a profession called customer success. Prior to Cribble, I worked also at another SaaS company, software company that was Splunk. It was also acquired by Cisco.
Right.
So I had 7 years at Splunk. And then before that, I worked some IT engineering roles at AIG, the global insurance company, and before that, 8 years at Lockheed Martin. So Lockheed Martin was the first stop after my military service.
Yeah. So you are a veteran yourself. So I know you have a lot in common when we are talking about transitioning your career. So what was that initial transition from your military service?
Absolutely terrifying. Right. No other way to describe the transition from military service to civilian occupation. I was an infantryman, so that would as far as the rest of the world concerns, that's a non-technical MOS, right? So the challenge of translating, everything from your language and behavior and how you look at how to describe your experience is a significant challenge coming out of that field and indeed any other branch of service MOS.
Do you think you were prepared for your transition?
Absolutely not.
Okay. So when you are talking to these service members, you can really understand maybe what's ahead of them, maybe better than they can.
I do, and I have a history of trying to partner at various orgs and locations with higher military, with trying to help orient brothers and sisters in arms, right, with this transition. Myself, I was doing telephone interviews within 90 days of returning from Iraq from, temporary housing in central Alaska with an infant crawling around on the floor and, trying to figure out like, hey, how do I make this transition stick?
Yeah.
So I absolutely empathize with just the general anxiety that will happen in this type of life milestone.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to get into some of those transition type questions. And now that you have made it to the other side, how you can help give that perspective to service members who are just beginning, their transition into maybe the private sector. And then for anyone watching, if you have specific questions about the software space or for Robbie, you can go ahead and drop them in the comments. I'm going to keep an eye on those. So as we continue our conversation here, why do you think the SaaS space or the software as a service space is something that veterans or transitioning service members should consider?
It comes down to holistic quality of life, really, right? So let's follow, right? Do something, if you're a technical person and you absolutely have an aptitude for tech, then technology offers fairly high compensation, right? Let's not make, any quips about that. As such, technology is also a very likely place where you'll be able to establish a solid work-life balance, right? So, access to technology, leveraging technology, all of those things are native in a SaaS, employer environment.
Okay. I love the mention of work-life balance. That's honestly not something I would have thought of in tech. So I think that is really important as we take a look at career longevity.
Absolutely. Yeah. And with tech, it's you're always going to feel like you're in an analytical research position, right? So tech is a series of waves, right? Just like the ocean, and the waves will continue to come on. You need, you have to establish expertise in a particular tech wave, and then always know that you're going to have to continue to look for the next wave, the next, hot technology. You're going to have to continue to reinvent yourself as a career, which transitioning out of the military is the first time many of, our service members will reinvent themselves. So it's a good habit to start.
And correct me if I'm wrong, is that service members are also used to nothing staying the same, right? That's are correct. Used to adapting to change, whether that's location, leadership. You need to be ready for anything. Am I right?
That's correct. Service members, at least the ones that I've had the pleasure of hiring right post-service, show that, they understand, they're objective oriented. And so long as they have a clear idea of the mission and what it takes to get there, then it's very, very easy for service members to succeed with that type of focus.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I want to get into some more Cribble type things as we kind of talk about roles and opportunities for anyone out there, service members that are looking for opportunities. Before we get into what sets Cribble apart, tell me in your words what Cribble does.
So Cribble provides the connective tissue for any modern complex data environment. All right. And so we're the original data engine, right, for security and IT information. Okay. Because what you've seen, this comes along with the wave analogy, is many vendors have created agents that then pick up data and transmit it to some destination, right? Splunk is an example, or Elastic, or CrowdStrike, and all of these things. What Cribble does is we're not trying to do cradle to grave. We're trying to empower IT and security organizations to control, manipulate, enhance, redirect, replay their own data. So you can think of it as we're a structural component of a data, telemetry pipeline.
Which makes you usable in any platform. You're not platform specific. You can kind of be part of this connective tissue anywhere.
Correct. One of our founding tenets is your data, essentially our customers' data, and they're in control of their data.
I love that. What do you think sets Cribble apart from other places you've worked? You've worked at obviously some really high profile places. What made you choose Cribble?
It's going back to the wave analogy, right? You have to recognize when the market is changing and technology is changing, and so you have to, I'm not ready to retire just yet, right? So have to continue to find the leading edge and continue to push the boundaries. So that's the why Cribble for me, right? Obviously, I identify with the founder's mission and how they want to enable control for our customers for their data and avoid vendor lock-in and all of that. I absolutely agree with. Empirically, right? Cribble's also highly regarded objectively, right? So 2025, we were number one according to number one startup employer. The year we were number 3 startup employer. So there's a lot of pride that comes along with being assessed by a third party that way. So, and if you're going to get on a boat, you want a boat that's going somewhere. So
very well said. I want to kind of emphasize that for some folks who might be watching that are approaching, maybe transitioning out of active duty service, or they're transitioning as in they're looking to start maybe a new chapter in their career. I think what you said is really important. I try to stress this to service members a lot about getting in at a company, as you kind of are using this wave analogy. While that wave is cresting is also a really important time in your personal career and also part of like the company's larger mission. So having that foresight, being able to talk to mentors and people in the space like yourself, because being at the cutting edge or leading edge and making that jump maybe before you're ready is something that comes with experience. And like we're talking about, that transition can be really scary too. But I imagine in the technology space, because things are constantly evolving, you need to also be assessing, where your boat, so to speak, is going.
I agree. It's absolutely true. A solid, healthy amount of introspection is always helpful. Now, having experienced mentors is key to provide that personal calibration, but you also
Sure.
got to be honest with yourself. And although it's cliche to say that many of us are our own worst enemy, right? But always bounce your personal interior view against a trusted, career mentor.
Yeah, we talk a lot about having like a personal board of advisors, right? Ultimately, you yourself are your, CEO or champion or president of your own company, being your company as your career. But you should have a trusted board of advisors to bounce ideas off of or have industry insight. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that I talk a lot about, and I think everyone is tired of personally me speaking about, is some of the SkillBridge roles and direct hire roles at Cribble. So I talk about the roles a lot because I love the type of roles that you guys have. I think they're excellent for transitioning service members. But what I wanted to focus on was, how do candidates who are watching at home, how would they present themselves as a best candidate, or what makes a candidate stand out to you when I'm, asking, when I'm like sourcing for candidates, or if someone came across your desk, what would make them stand out?
Well, to me, so there's a level of minimal assumption with technical componentry, right? So look at your own resumes, right? And engage in this and go, hey, what sort of technology systems have I dealt with? What are my native technologies? What has my hands been on? And those type of things, that sets the table stakes for getting through an interview process, et cetera. You get to an interview, at that point, I have a functional assumption that technology is not your limitation. So now what am I assessing? I'm assessing, to be quite frank, I'm assessing executive presence.
Yeah.
Right. And now I say that with some degree of chagrin, because I'm not asking for anybody to sing their regimental song like they're in a promotion board. Right.
Sure.
That's not what I'm looking for. All right.
Yeah.
But I'm looking for, are you in sufficient command and control of your own scope and purpose?
Yeah.
Much of what we do in my profession is on the post-sale side, involves placing a member of my staff in front of a customer executive staff.
Yeah.
Right. That could be a CIO or a CISO of
Sure.
a government agency, branch of service, a number of things like that. So if you think about it, I'm looking to figure out who can I trust to maintain professional bearing and technical excellence in an executive facing environment. That's my challenge as a hiring manager.
I like the idea of the executive presence. I don't think that's something that we in the Hire Military to Nova space talk about enough, to be honest. And what you said, I want to make sure that people really heard. That executive presence, meaning you, the company, have faith in putting this person to represent your company in front of the head of another company. Not only will they have those technical expertise, but they will have the command and control and presence in the conversation to explain your product and problem solve.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's a great way to restate it. I would add, it's a complication service members may have is understanding terms of like business value, right? Because so often you get, I was a logistician at, a supply company or did this and that. Well, you have to reframe your military experience into, okay, if it were a business, what part of the business's value chain did you occupy? Right. So a logistics company, a simple example, convert that over to a major commercial distributor or transportation company. Right.
Yeah.
So moving things is their business. So what you were doing had business value. You have to figure out a way to translate it.
Absolutely. It's typically in that translation that I think service members sometimes get lost.
Yes. Yeah, I would completely agree. Right. Everybody knows the service members that, you go through transition assistance and they're telling you, hey, you got to demilitarize your resume.
Yeah.
Right. Good advice. But what is that advice really? Like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
And so, just dropping nomenclature out of your resume is not really going to do it. So.
Yes. I met with a transitioning service member a couple of months ago. Super nice candidate, I would say, had a great executive presence. We had a nice conversation. I asked if he would send me his resume, and I noticed that he took all of his military experience and translated it into civilian experience. And I honestly thought I was talking to maybe the wrong person, as I was expecting to get much more military nomenclature. And I said, I think you've really watered down your experience. I think you've done yourself a disservice, and I absolutely understand the idea behind that. No, most of the population has not served. And so if you overemphasize or lead with acronyms and maybe terms that the private sector won't understand, also maybe not the best path forward. However, you do want to accurately represent what you've done, because you probably, like you said, you have this knowledge. Now, how do we make sure that someone in the private sector can understand? So it really is a translation, a lot of times a translation issue.
I would. There's one point I want to emphasize, and I really want to foot stomp this for all the service members out there.
Okay.
Right? Is every job that exists in the military, right, with a footnote, okay, with an asterisk, exists outside the military. Every single one. Right. Now, obviously, there's some edge cases that we can laugh about, right?
Sure.
But just remember that. And so when you're looking at your resume going, how do I make myself competitive? I believe I'm experienced. Well, have faith. Especially now, there's a lot of great tools. I'll drop in the ubiquitous, do some research with AI, right? Leverage the available technology waves that are coming, right? And you'll find those connection points, but absolutely have faith. What you did in the military exists somewhere out of the military.
Yeah. I love that. I love that perspective. We want kind of like the next question for me, as I was thinking about our conversation, is we often, we as in people in the space, either who work with transitioning service members or veterans, that could be for-profit or nonprofit. A lot of times we are trying to prepare service members for what to ask, right? What questions to ask, what they should bring to the table. But I have a question for you. What are they not asking that they should be asking? Or what did you wish you knew that you now know, being on the other side of the private sector after your transition and starting in this space?
It's oh man, it's challenging, right? What I wish they were asking, or my guidance, things for them to explore so they can ask intelligent questions about these topics, as part of a process. Understand compensation models.
It's a big one. Yeah.
Right. If you're career military and you entered service early, you've never seen, I'll say this tongue in cheek, you've never seen a real paycheck. You have no idea, the overall structure. Like, so understand compensation models, like, hey, are you on a 80% base, 20% bonus plan? If so, how does your bonus get paid?
Yep.
Right. And it's okay to ask these questions. Yeah. There is an anxiety, and any leader of sufficient quality that you're interviewing with is going to understand that you're coming from a place where some of these questions, they need to help orient you to that, because the other underlying thing is you're actually in a negotiation. So you need to ask, because that's relevant information to your overall perspective on the opportunity you are attempting to leverage. So ask questions, absolutely.
Questions, yes.
Secondarily, the culture of where you're going. Believe it or not, companies have strong independent cultures at times, and you need to find one that fits for you. So don't allow the anxiety of the transition. Say, I need a job, any job, anywhere. Don't do that. For the first time in your life, potentially, you're in a controlling position where you can say, where do I want to align? You've completed your service, all of that. Now you have a choice. So find a place that has a culture, as best you can determine, that aligns with your own personal value. And if you don't know anything about the culture and you have no idea what to do, start with the mission of the company.
Oh, great advice. Yeah.
Because if nothing else, you can bond over that. I credit not only my very first hiring manager, the first a gentleman that hired me, and I won't name his name here because I don't want him to get inundated, but my professional father, right? As I consider him now, was my first hiring manager who hired me at Lockheed Martin out of the military. And I credit my 8 years at Lockheed Martin allowing me to transition from combat arms warfighter to, recovering civilian, essentially.
Yeah.
And I was able to embrace the mission of Lockheed Martin and the programs I was assigned, and that helped me cope with the transition from going, one of the guys in Baghdad to now back home. So,
could you speak a little bit about the culture at Cribble?
We are a hard-charging, mature startup. It is, yes, it is. It is a duocracy.
Okay.
And I give our executive leadership team, specifically, all of them, but also Clint is also very outspoken in essentially telling us to FAFO.
Yeah. And if you don't know what that is, go Google it.
Yeah, I'm not going to say that.
You're 40, you probably do.
Yeah, I won't say it here on this forum, but it's certainly said inside the company plenty. But essentially, it says don't ask for permission within the boundaries of professionalism. Go and do. There is an email that he sent to practically everybody in the company that said AI is now no longer optional. Of course, you're hearing that everywhere.
Yeah.
But to give you a sense as to what it really means, we're in engineering spaces. We're now doing product development and enhancements that are measured in days instead of weeks or months.
Yeah.
So get fluent and avail yourself of all the available resources that you can.
I really like what you said about the culture at Cribble. I think that gives people a good understanding of also just the space, right? This is moving quickly, right? In a space that changes a lot. You need to be at the forefront. If you're not first, you're last. We're moving forward. We're charging ahead. We are not asking permission. This also sounds like a great space for someone who's a rapid learner, is what I'm also taking in. I had a question from someone watching. So thank you guys for the questions if you're watching, about what is your hiring process at Cribble?
So allow me to say generally in the SaaS company.
Yeah.
It will be brutal. It will absolutely be brutal. In 2018, when I was joining the previous company I was at, I think it was 5 interviews.
Wow.
And I think I was I think I made it through in the least amount of rounds. I think some were 6 or 7 rounds. Cribble, specifically, the way it begins is there'll be a screening interview with me, right?
Yeah.
So, I say there'll be a hiring manager screening interview, which is preceded by, you'll get a call from an HR recruiter, which will kind of spot check you, where you at, and kind of get a sense as to, how, from a compensation, experience, alignment, kind of general personability kind of standpoint. Then it comes to me for a functional screen, right? From there, you're looking at least 2 more interviews. And at Cribble, we also put our candidates through a lab. Okay. So this is like an hour-long lab where you will interact, you will do some things with our product, and you will turn that in to us. So, and it can, depending on the role, can include other things like a success plan, right? You're going to have a hypothetical scenario for a fictitious company, and you're going to have to respond to the scenario. So, and that's not uncommon. So
I was just going to say that. I was going to say this is not uncommon.
Not uncommon at all. So, but it's expectations in the space.
100% agree. And I'm glad that someone asked that question. So thank you for who asked that. I don't have it up on the screen. I think that might be news to some people who are watching and maybe not familiar with this type of interview. But even through my experience in this space, this is very standard. Even for interns, people in this space, they need to do at least 2 interviews. Sometimes, depending on the company and expectations, they do have to turn in a project. It could be also done live. I've had that happen as well. So I also think that's a great test for the candidate, right? To be able to carry that executive presence, to carry that control that we talked about through multiple interviews, to see how you handle a group setting, because I imagine some of these interviews include more than one person, as well as getting your hands on the product that you are going to be expected to work with and or sell or problem solve, sounds really appropriate.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's two ways to think of it. If a direct hire like kind of approach, if you want to impress people, like especially where you had no prior background, like come into that kind of interview process. As a philosophical thing, all of our training and certifications are free and will always be free. And that's not always the case around the tech environment. So, you want to impress people, leverage the free and available resources, right, that are there. For interns, absolutely, it will be a grueling existence because either at Cribble or my preceding companies, I will absolutely make sure that even if I can't convert you to a full-time employee, you will absolutely be better qualified than you came in as.
Yes, 100%. I want you to make sure that the people at home heard that the Cribble certifications are free. You can obtain this knowledge for free on their website. I talk about this really frequently. So if you are out there listening or hear this on the recording and you think that Cribble could be a place that you might be interested in exploring, what would be the next steps that people watching could take?
Absolutely. Go to Cribble University and dive in. You can be a certified Cribble user, which is our entry, like it's our very first tier of certification in 8 hours. So, not to turn it too brisk the other way, but if you won't invest 8 hours in yourself, then, you're placing yourself at a disadvantage for your future.
100%. I just heard, and this I don't think is news to anyone, the average adult looks at their phone 4 hours a day.
I can believe it.
If you can reduce your screen time by only 50%, you can have this Cribble user certification done in just a couple days, in less than a Monday through Friday. So I think if you are willing to invest that and be a standout candidate, I'm going to say that's worth it.
Absolutely.
As we wrap up today, Robbie, is there anything else that you would like to leave our audience with? Advice, anything you want them to connect with Cribble about, any opportunities that you want to highlight?
Let's see. Let's start with the most important, the advice for the transitioning service members, right? Like you're entering a wild, crazy world, and you need to acknowledge that your transition is a stressful and rare transition point in your life. And we've all known many people that transitioned successfully, maybe some that didn't quite transition successfully, right? So it is a stressful point. Absolutely use the resources either that are private, commercial, such as Cribble training or other vendor training that are available in addition to your transition resources that you have available. Absolutely do it. You owe it to yourself and your family.
Yes.
As far as Cribble professionally, like we're the original telemetry pipeline vendor. I obviously am here. I have a strong desire for Cribble to be successful. We are always, customer success is growing. So my particular profession, but also tech support, also professional services. If you really just like to be on the keyboard and tinker with things, there's absolutely roles here, and we're looking for the best of the best. So investigate and dig in.
Awesome. I imagine you can find those all on Cribble.com on your careers page. We also have a SkillBridge position that we help with that I talk about really frequently. So people can check out what the qualifications are for that on our website. If you have any questions or want to be connected with Robbie, you guys can reach out to me and I will connect you with Robbie right at 30 minutes, like I planned it. Robbie, I just want to really thank you for being a great partner, for always being open to sharing your experience and speaking with transitioning service members and veterans about the opportunity at Cribble and in the space. You've been so generous with your time that I really just wanted to say thank you.
Always happy to help. And for those who want to meet me in person or in the DC area, we have our very first public sector Cribble Connect on May 21st. So y'all come by and check it out.
Okay, so live in-person event, May 21st in the DC area, Cribble Connect. Does that sound right?
Yep, that's right.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, you heard it here first. Robbie just invited you, so you better show up. I just want to thank everyone for attending our office hours today, where you don't have to wonder what the industry is thinking. We bring the industry to you. So, guys, thanks so much for your attention today, and thank you, Robbie. And we'll catch you on the next episode. See ya.